On July 2nd of this year, Elie Wiesel passed away. And on that night, I felt compelled to write to our congregation. It is difficult to imagine a more significant communal loss, I wrote. I noted that Wiesel is credited with introducing the Holocaust to a world that had chosen to ignore its reality. But Elie Wiesel was so much more than a witness to man's inhumanity to man. His greatest impact was that, in time, Wiesel transcended his own suffering. He became a powerful force for decency and justice. He devoted the rest of his life to cultivating the human capacity for compassion. He inspired the best impulses of all people. He did that through his writing, his speaking, his moral leadership. In truth, Elie Wiesel epitomized what it means to be human and what it means to be a Jew. Yes, for generations, he was a beacon guiding the path of righteousness. And I think we all felt secure in the long shadow that he cast. Muhammad Ali passed this year too. As we know, his impact extended far beyond the boxing ring. Ali challenged all of us to see the complexities of the Vietnam War. His adherence to personal moral conviction made him a symbol of individual integrity and a voice for peace in a time of growing conflict. The list goes on. We lost Harper Lee this year as well. In writing To Kill a Mockingbird, she shaped the moral sense of a generations, I should say, of young Americans. She told a sobering tale of race relations in the Deep South during the Jim Crow era. It seems to me that this year, and in other recent years, we have lost an extraordinary number of figures of great stature. It was only a couple of years ago that Nelson Mandela died. And just this week, Shimon Peres. So I wonder, on this eve of a new year, how are we to forge a world of hope and justice and peace without their substantial influence and their moral example? Perhaps I'm feeling particularly adrift this Rosh Hashanah because of 3 additional losses that affected me personally this year. Rabbi Eugene Borowitz died in January. Dr. Borowitz was the towering figure among Reform rabbis, the great intellectual and moral voice of Reform Judaism. He taught generations of us rabbis, and he held us to rigorous philosophical and ethical standards. As students, we cowered in fear of his piercing gaze. Yet in time we realized that he didn't ask anything of us that he didn't require of himself. And we loved him for that. We were grateful for his high expectations, which challenged us to reach farther and deeper than we otherwise would have. Father Tom Hartman died in February. In addition to serving as a beloved priest on Long Island, Father Tom created an interfaith program for Catholic and Jewish teens, in which I participated when I was in high school, and subsequently I led that program early on in my rabbinate. Father Tom taught me that kindness was of infinite value. He taught me that a good deed, however small it may seem, never goes unnoticed. And he also taught me about the power of faith. As the bagpipes sounded their farewell at his funeral, I cried for the loss of sweetness and gentleness in our world. And when you and I sit together and we discuss matters of life and God, I want you to know that Father Tom is sitting there together with us as well. And my great aunt, Estelle Fallick, She passed also this year in April at the age of 96. At her graveside funeral, I spoke of Estelle as a woman of class, grace, and sophistication. She was extraordinarily generous. She possessed a deep wisdom. And more than that, she knew how to share that wisdom in just the right way. Her passing marked the end of an era in our family, because now, sadly, no one of my grandparents' generation remains. Now, some people may not need moral exemplars in their life, but I do. Left to my own devices, without the influence of teachers, mentors, who knows what choices I would make? I need others to set an example. I need others to show me how good human beings can be. I need others to set a standard to live up to. I never met Elie Wiesel, nor Muhammad Ali, nor Harper Lee. And neither Dr. Borowitz, nor Father Tom, nor even Aunt Estelle were a daily presence in my life. But I needed them. It seems impossible that we will begin a new Jewish year without these moral exemplars. And I wonder, how can I find my way without these individuals to guide our path? Who will hold us to high expectations? Who will inspire us to be our best selves? We think about how we learn what is right and good. Much of that credit certainly goes to our parents in our early years. They teach us how to behave, how to treat others, share with friends, apologize when you've hurt someone, see your commitments through. And then there are the principles we learn along the way. Perhaps they come from our Torah. Care for the widow, the orphan, and the stranger. Love your neighbor as yourself. And then there are the influential figures who teach us by the power of personal example. They teach us not from aphorisms or parables or laws, but rather from their unshakable integrity, their innate goodness, their sheer force of character. Yes, in any endeavor, we need models to show us the way. We need them to envision and then to live out for us what is possible. So with all the losses we have suffered, who will now be our moral exemplars? In the realm of sacred texts, Christians surely have the advantage. They can look to the life of Jesus. The stories about his life are written in exactly that manner, as a moral exemplar for all to follow. He's a man who not only does what is right, but who spends his entire life in selfless, generous actions to alleviate poverty and foster peace. Our Torah, in contrast, is filled with morally dubious men and women. Abraham kicks his first son Ishmael out of the house, and the boy nearly dies of thirst in the desert. And then he almost goes through with the sacrifice of his second beloved son, Isaac. Jacob swindles his brother out of the family birthright and tricks his father into giving him the coveted blessing intended for the firstborn. Moses is a reluctant leader. He's constantly complaining about those he must lead, angry at God for the role that has been thrust upon him. He's unable to control his own emotions. He's beset by thirsty and rambunctious followers. He verbally insults his people and then strikes the rock that he had been told to speak to draw water from it. And he is thus barred from entering the promised land. So while the laws and principles of the Torah always provide our ethical blueprint, our biblical ancestors were terribly flawed. They are hardly the models we aim to live up to. In more recent times, we know that political leaders used to be considered moral exemplars. Athletes did too, and so did newscasters. We used to endow all of these individuals with a level of public trust and integrity. All of that has, of course, evaporated. So as we sit here to consider and reflect, I would ask you, how do you trace your own moral genealogy? Who shaped the standards by which you carry yourself? To whom do you look as a model of how to live a good life? I would bet that each of us has several figures in our life, and I would bet that few of them are famous. For many, it is a parent who provides the model of character and fortitude that we aim to follow well into adulthood. For some of us, it is the friend whose approval we seek, not because she is popular, but because she spends her time and her talent in ways that we admire. There's the colleague who went out of his way to help a coworker. It's something we wish we had done. In fact, maybe we intended to do it, but somehow we just never got around to it, but he did. It could be the mentor who hired you and who showed you the ropes with patience and generosity, or the supervisor who mercifully gave you a break when you really needed one. There's the relative whose life might not make headlines, but whose hard work and commitment to family we have always admired. Or it's the friend you turn to when you want to have a truly honest and authentic conversation. Or even the acquaintance who, when faced with a terminal diagnosis, turned tragedy into an opportunity to inspire others. And for some, it is the spouse who we try to make proud every single day. A friend of mine said of her husband, his balance between emotional wisdom, sensitivity, and true goodness keeps us consistently on the right side of every decision. So in this new year, let's make a commitment to surround ourselves with human beings whose moral consistency we admire and upon whose moral compass we can rely. This is how we remind ourselves to stick to that path of righteousness. In this new year, let's commit to spending more time with those who inspire us, who bring out the best in us, who remind us that we can do more than we imagine. For it is not up to us to fashion new moral heroes. I doubt such a thing is possible anyway. You can't invent an Elie Wiesel, a Nelson Mandela. We cannot create exemplars by building someone up, for to do so would inevitably fail. Now, perhaps you, too, have suffered a similar loss this year, a significant loss. A teacher, a mentor, a friend, an exemplar. Especially as a generation of influential figures passes on, we realize that we are the ones who must fill the void. We must be the moral exemplars ourselves. Is that too much responsibility? I don't think so. There's an old rabbinic story that I love. Rabbi Zusia, a great sage of his generation, lay dying. His students were gathered around him. Zusia was scared and he was trembling, and his students asked him, "What are you afraid of, Rabbi?" He said, "I have realized that in the world to come, God will not ask me, 'Why were you not as great as Moses?' Instead, God will simply ask me, 'Why were you not as great as Zusia?'" Yes, a world without historic moral exemplars can still be a world of goodness and hope. We need only be Zusia to make it so. We need only be our best selves. I've listened to many B'nai Mitzvah students stand right here at this bima and speak about the example set by Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks. And I pray that they may one day live up to the achievements of Dr. King or Ms. Parks, God willing. But let me tell you, I have heard just as many B'nai Mitzvah students stand here and speak about the example provided by their own parents and grandparents. And let me tell you, that's just as powerful, if not more so. Those of you who have visited my office have seen that I have a number of black and white photos on the walls. They are there to remind me that I am heir to a particular moral legacy. There's a series of photos of rabbis marching with Dr. King and Reverend Abernathy and other civil rights leaders. It's there to remind me that I am the inheritor of the mantle of rabbis who worked to create a world of justice and peace outside of these walls. But more importantly, there's the photo of my grandfather, George Goldberg. He died 14 years ago, but his image remains just next to my desk. More than Elie Wiesel or Dr. Borowitz or Father Tom, it's my grandfather's example that I strive to live up to. He's with me every day. He's looking just over my shoulder. And every day I want to make him proud. We need not wonder where our moral exemplars have gone. They're sitting right here among us. Each of us need not be Moses. We need only to be Zusia. Each of us can live the goodness that is within us, and we do live that goodness, instilled by our parents, nurtured by our teachers, cultivated by our mentors, enriched by our spouses, inspired by our friends. That is our moral legacy, and that legacy will reverberate down through the generations. In this new year, may it be so. Ken Yehi Ratzon. Amen.
Has anybody here seen my old friend Abraham? Can you tell me where he's going? He freed a lot of people, but it seems the good die young. But I just looked around and he's gone. Has anybody here seen my old friend John? Can you tell me where he's going? He freed a lot of people, but it seems the good die young. But I just looked around and he's gone. Has anybody here seen my old friend Martin? Can you tell me where he's going? He freed a lot of people, but it seems the good die young. But I just looked around and he's gone. Didn't you love the things they stood for? Didn't they try to find some good for you and me? And we'll be free someday soon. It's gonna be one day. Has anybody seen my old friend Yitzchak? tell me where he's gone. Thought I saw him walking up over the hill with Abraham, Martin, and John. With Abraham, Martin, and John.